What's up guys, my name is Ivan Baldovinos, and on this channel I provide tips, tricks, advice, and strategies for your graduate school applications. So if you are new here, consider subscribing. In today's video, I wanted to share with you one of my favorite assignments of the quarter. For my Transforming Education Systems course, I was tasked to write a policy brief on an educational policy or educational policy issue. I chose to write my policy issue on FAFSA completion rates in Washington State. The second part of the assignment was for us to create an advocacy tool that showcased our educational policy issue. I chose to create a YouTube video that showcases the FAFSA completion landscape in Washington State. That way people can be aware of what these issues are for Washington State and how we can mitigate these issues by creating policies and practices to support our most vulnerable students. For context, go watch my vlog that I made on my process of developing both the advocacy tool as well as this policy brief. It'll give you a little bit of insight of all the challenges I faced as I wrote this policy brief and came up with my ideas and wrote my outline. The title for my policy brief was Boosting FAFSA Completion in Washington State to Increase Access to Higher Education for Students from Rural Communities. And this first page I chose to do a picture of my hometown of Soap Lake. You can see it's very rural, very small. And then my first section is my introduction. Completing the free application for federal student aid is a critical first step towards attaining an affordable college education in the United States. Every school year, the U.S. Department of Education's Office of Federal Student Aid provides more than $120 billion in financial aid to help eligible students pay for college. However, many eligible students do not apply and therefore forego significant amounts of financial aid. The purpose of this policy brief is to develop a common understanding of the existing FAFSA completion landscape in Washington State and to make recommendations for developing state and institutional policies and practices to increase FAFSA completion rates amongst Washingtonians, specifically our most vulnerable student populations. In 2020, Washington State ranked 49th in FAFSA completion, with 46% of high school seniors completing the financial aid application. As of May 3rd, 2021, only 41.2% of high school seniors have submitted a FAFSA application. When we stratify the data further, we notice that there is a significant disparity in FAFSA completion in rural Washington State, specifically in Grant County, Yakima County, and Benton counties. Districts in these counties, for example, have FAFSA completion rates as low as 0% and as high as 41.6%. Overall, we know that Washington State struggles to get their high school seniors to complete the FAFSA application every year, and oftentimes results in lower college enrollment. In order for Washington State to create equitable post-secondary education opportunities for all Washingtonians, we need to develop and implement state and institutional policies and practices to increase FAFSA completion rates. Then I put a little graph just to kind of show more information on where I got my data, and you can see the disparities in FAFSA completion in rural counties. The following section was the literature review. To better understand the importance of FAFSA completion for Washington State students, we need to understand who the FAFSA non-completers are, their characteristics, and reasoning behind their lack of FAFSA completion. We also need to understand some of the barriers that contribute to not completing the FAFSA. Finally, it is important to examine successful FAFSA completion policies in order to adopt similar mandates and support services in Washington State. So my next section, under the literature review. Who does not complete the FAFSA? Mark Kantrowitz, in his student aid policy analysis titled Reasons Why Students Do Not File the FAFSA, utilizes data from the National Post-Secondary Student Aid Study in order to describe 5 reasons why students do not file the FAFSA. The study, which surveyed 114,000 undergraduate students, found that students did not file the FAFSA because of the following reasons. They thought they were ineligible, no financial aid, or no financial need, did not want to take on debt, no information on how to apply, and they thought the forms were too much work. Similarly, Davidson, in a study titled Increasing FAFSA Completion Rates, Research Policies and Practices reported that the main reason students do not apply for financial aid are because of the complexity of the FAFSA loan debt, other, and no financial need. Moreover, Kantrowitz, in his analysis of why some students do not apply for financial aid, found that the most common reason students did not apply for FAFSA were because they did not think they would qualify. They said they were ineligible because they were not a U.S. citizen or permanent resident. They found the form long and confusing. They had no need for financial student aid, and concerns about privacy. The study also found that participants cited other reasons as to why they did not complete the FAFSA. These other reasons were that they did not have all the required documents, their parents and their student have not yet filed their income tax returns, they previously applied for financial aid and was denied, and they were unaware of the FAFSA. It is important to also note the several characteristics of those eligible students who do not apply for federal student aid. According to Kantrowitz, 69.7% of students who do not apply for federal student aid attend two-year institutions. Additionally, 62.3% of students who do not apply for federal student aid are enrolled part-time. As practitioners and policymakers, we need to review the literature related to FAFSA completion in order to improve and create change. Based on these studies, we know that many students believe the FAFSA application is complicated. We know that some students struggle to obtain financial information from their parents, and some students do not complete the FAFSA because they are either unaware of the application or they do not qualify because they are not a U.S. citizen. Washington State has policies in place that allow undocumented people to gain access to state financial aid via the Washington Application for State Financial Aid, or also known as the WASFA application. Thus, we need to provide opportunities for Washington State residents to learn about the financial aid opportunities in our state. Reviewing the literature on FAFSA completion and conducting state-specific FAFSA completion studies can magnify the barriers Washingtonians face with FAFSA completion, and in return, can help practitioners and policymakers develop policies and practices to mitigate barriers to FAFSA completion. My third section here within the literature review was a case study, Louisiana's mandatory completion requirements. Several state policymakers have implemented strategies that require their students to complete the FAFSA in order to graduate from high school and or qualify for state scholarships and financial aid programs. In 2015, for example, the state of Louisiana passed their financial aid access policy, in order to create equitable access to post-secondary opportunities for all students. This policy requires all public high school graduates to take one of the following steps: submit a FAFSA, apply for the Tailored Opportunities Program for students, submit an opt-out non-participation form or letter, or receive a waiver through the school system. Completing the FAFSA allows eligible students to access state and federal financial aid in the form of grants, work-study, and/or loans that can be used at four-year universities, two-year community colleges, and technical training programs. TOPS is a program of state scholarships for Louisiana residents who attend either one of the Louisiana public college and universities, schools that are part of the Louisiana Community and Technical College System, Louisiana-approved proprietary and cosmetology schools, or institutions that are part of the Louisiana Association of Independent College and Universities. Since the inception of the financial aid access policy, the state of Louisiana has achieved success with statewide FAFSA completion. According to the National College Access Network, in 2019, Louisiana ranked number 1 in FAFSA completion with 82.6% completion rate. Louisiana achieved these results with targeted support services to encourage compliance. In addition to creating and implementing the financial aid access policy, the Louisiana Department of Education also created a Louisiana Council Assistance Center. They developed a database which tracks FAFSA application completion across districts, and they began to offer grants to schools systems in order to develop capacity to counsel families on financial aid planning for post-secondary education. Additionally, the Department of Education established a financial aid working group, a forum to ensure parents, students, and school systems could provide feedback on financial aid access and support. Collectively, the financial aid access policy and the support services have helped Louisiana rank number 1 in the nation with FAFSA completion. The next section of this assignment was for us to use the data, the information, the literature that we read, and use that to write our own recommendations for improvement of the educational policy or educational policy issue. And so I'm only going to share a few with you just because this video is getting a little bit long, but I'm going to share with you some of my favorite recommendations that I provided. So the first one was I wanted to propose a mandatory FAFSA or WASFA high school completion requirement. So, and I took from the case study, so I took some of the elements that the Louisiana mandate provided and used that to shape the policy for Washington State. So, mandatory FAFSA or WASFA high school completion requirement. According to the National College Attainment Network, for the 2020-2021 academic year, Tennessee and Louisiana ranked number 1 and 2 respectively in FAFSA completion rates amongst their high school seniors. Both of these states have implemented mandated FAFSA completion requirements for the graduating high school seniors and therefore have achieved great results. Washington State needs to adopt a similar policy in order to not only increase FAFSA completion rates, but to also increase equitable access to higher education for our most vulnerable populations. Washington State's financial aid completion policy should allow high school seniors to take one of the following steps. Complete the FAFSA or WASFA. Submit a non-participation letter describing reasons for not participating, or submitting a waiver from the district. School districts will be required to facilitate various FAFSA or WASFA completion workshops throughout the year in order for students and families to complete the application. Bilingual workshops will be available. To ensure compliance and increase access to resources, school districts will have the opportunity to apply for grants to support FAFSA or WASFA completion efforts. Finally, all high school teachers and administrators will be required to complete a 3-day professional development conference that will teach them about the FAFSA and WASFA and how to utilize FAFSA or WASFA resources and how to best support students with completion of the application. The next recommendation I'm going to read to you all is, let's see, this one titled Mobile College Access Clinics. The Mobile College Access Clinic is a customized vehicle that travels to the heart of communities in rural Washington State in order to provide free information, resources, and consultations for college application process. This includes FAFSA or WASFA assistance, college planning, scholarship support, college application assistance, and more. The goal is to make college information more accessible to students from rural Washington State. Alright, so finally the last thing that we had to do is obviously write a little conclusion. So here's the conclusion for this assignment. Stakeholders who wish to increase equitable access to higher education for Washington State students should consider exploring the FAFSA completion policy strategies highlighted in this policy brief. Implementing policies and practices that help Washingtonians receive the financial aid they qualify for will help mitigate financial barriers to higher education, especially to our most vulnerable students. Alright, so I hope you enjoyed learning about coursework and how a final for one of the courses that I took for my PhD program looks like. I know for me, I wish I had a video like this so I could see kind of what should I expect as an incoming PhD student, but there's not that much out there in the YouTube world, and so I thought that I would provide this video for all you, that way you know what to kind of expect when you are in a PhD program or just really in graduate school. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next video.